Hello everyone, and welcome to the European Social Union Debate, a podcast series from Eurovisions discussing the way ahead for the establishment of a European Social Union with policy experts, politicians and institutional representatives. This podcast series is a spin-off of an editorial project published on the Eurovisions website where top scholars from European universities discuss the potentialities of a European Social Union. My name is Alexander Damiano Ricci and I'm your host. Joining today's discussion on the establishment of a European Social Union, Patrizia Toia, MEP of the Italian party Partito Democratico, a member of the group of the Progressive Alliance of Socialists and Democrats in the European Parliament. Welcome, Mrs. Toia.
Thank you for the invitation.
Mrs. Toia, as to what concerns the social dimension of the European Union, the establishment of the European Pillar of Social Rights in Gothenburg in November 2017 can be considered a milestone. However, the very concept of a European Social Union somehow implies already moving ahead towards a more ambitious and comprehensive form of integration in the field of social Europe. A number of scholars writing on Eurovisions argue that such a development is very much needed today. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, yes. Sono totalmente d'accordo.
The European Pillar of Social Rights is a much-awaited milestone, but I agree that we need to move beyond. We need a fully-fledged European Social Union. This European Social Union needs to be complementary to the Economic and Monetary Union. Otherwise, we will not be able to build those social policies which are so useful to our citizens. Although these policies have always been at the heart of the S&D Group, they are more important than ever. And Europe nowadays needs to focus on the needs of its citizens. Otherwise, the anti-European trends that we see across Europe will prevail.
Fair enough, we will come to that. Let's focus first a bit on the academic content we have on our website, because according to the framework provided by Professor Maurizio Ferrera on Eurovisions, the establishment of a European Social Union could stem from the systematic interaction of the following ingredients, which are national social protection systems, social schemes and policies characterized by a cross-border element, novel membership spaces coterminous with the EU external borders, the set of objectives of the social nature contained in the Lisbon Treaty, and supranational policies that have an explicit social purpose. If we focus on this supranational level, among the priorities of the European Parliament, there are some policies which could indeed already reinforce certain components of the European Social Union. I'm thinking here, of course, of EU-wide social policies, such as, for instance, the Child Guarantee or a framework directive for minimum income. In your opinion, what are the prospects for the approval and implementation of these social policies nowadays?
Although I share the vision of Professor Maurizio Ferrera, I think that the way ahead is full of hurdles because not all political groups do support this vision. Better said, they back it only in principle, but not with concrete actions or voting behaviors, both in the Council or the European Parliament. We need to start to uniform the type of social policies we have in different EU member states. And let's see how we can strengthen what we already have at the supranational level and build up on this. We need as well policies with a huge symbolic impact, such as the Child Guarantee. On this particular point, let me say that we must recall what has been achieved. Indeed, the European Parliament, thanks to the S&D Group, has anticipated the implementation of a pilot project to test the Child Guarantee. This project will take place next year, and there will be a few billion euros allocated to this project. The aim is to include the policy into the next European Social Fund in the frame of the multi-annual financial framework. Therefore, the Child Guarantee must become a cornerstone of EU social policies. Another important policy worth mentioning is the work-life balance. This shows that some important things have been done, but much lays still ahead if we want to build a European Social Union in a systematic way.
Do you think that a European Social Union would somehow represent a European and constructive answer to public demands for more social security and protection, which at the very present moment are often captured by populist parties and leaders in this continent?
Absolutely. We have to admit that the recent tide of sovereignist and national forces hinges upon a certain degree of social malaise. A lot of citizens didn't see an answer to this. And if it is true that the nation-states are in charge, citizens were expecting action as well from Europe. Today, Europe needs to protect, which does not mean that the fear of the other or, say, of a migrant invasion is justified. It simply means that there is a demand for social protection and, crucially, for social promotion. Indeed, I don't think that welfare equals mere assistance. Welfare means to be freed from needs. Thus, we need policies that give our citizens the right tools. I believe that Europe has to build a European social union on the base of this philosophy, which is in line with its original mission, namely, to combine social and economic rights and political freedom. Moreover, let's recall that Europe keeps being a unique place in the world for the living standard it grants. However, globalization is threatening the standards. Saving the standards means saving Europe. That's what citizens ask for. If Europe will not act, citizens will notice it, and they will blame Europe. Eventually, let me clearly state that social policies are not needed because of populism. They must be set up independently from the recent political developments.
We have the upcoming European electoral campaign. Yes. What are the chances that the establishment of a European social union becomes one of the key elements of the S&D Group? Because if I recall correctly, the establishment of a European social union was indeed part of the electoral program of the Italian Partito Democratico on the occasion of the last Italian general elections back in 2018.
A draft program has already been approved by our political group, and all parties belonging to it should adapt to its content. As to what concerns Italy and the Partito Democratico, I presented a document at our latest convention in Italy that outlines how to build a new Europe. It contains, in the first place, a policy shift away from austerity and fiscal stability. The latter cannot be ends themselves, but must be tools to support growth. In the second place, the policies enacted within this framework must be sustainable from a social, human, and environmental point of view. Last but not least, we need to develop a more democratic Europe. This means that the EU treaties must be changed. More precisely, we aim to increase the power of the European Parliament, leveling the power balance with the Council. Secondarily, let's get rid of unanimity inside the Council. In the third place, the European Commission must become less bureaucratic and more efficient. All this adds up to an overall political reform of Europe, which is the key to the setup of its social dimension.
Are we there where we say really in the program a European social union, or is it just more social Europe?
No.
Well, there is no definitive program yet, but I personally take up the challenge to make sure that the wording European social union will be inside of it.
You mentioned unemployment guarantee. These are pan-European solidarity measures, which involve different countries. How much cohesion do you see on these policies within your S&D group, mostly in terms of national differences?
I will be honest, it is not always easy to reconcile the perspective of 28 different member states. For instance, views differ between North and South. Nordic countries are more sensitive to the issue of balanced budget. At the same time, it must be recalled that the very same countries have more comprehensive welfare states if compared to southern ones. Also, between East and West, there are divergences, of course. But the challenge of reconciling these divergences is what makes Europe unique. As to what my political group is concerned, therefore, there are several interpretations of how things should be done in the social domain. But there is one joint objective, namely, to focus on the needs of citizens and provide more social justice to put everyone at the same level. On the other hand, if one day we will be able to establish a European social union, let's not expect to have the same priorities across all countries. Some member states will spend more on education, others on pensions. What matters, though, is that we have common minimum standards. Furthermore, we must recall that the divergences we see in terms of policy priorities are also dependent on territorial inequalities, which in turn fosters social inequalities. That is why social funds aimed at territorial cohesion are so important, and why it is important to move on with these policies, even more so in contexts where, over the past few years, imbalances have increased.
Okay, what about the trade unions?
The S&D Group is constantly looking for a dialogue with trade unions. More than that, social dialogue, as written in the EPSR, is fundamental. That said, let's not forget that also within every single country, trade unions have often different views. Helpfully, in many countries, trade unions are united under some sort of coordinative institution. Anyhow, for our political group, social dialogue is of paramount importance, both with business and trade unions. Let's not forget that, in the case of my country, the constitutions say that Italy is a democratic republic based on labor, and workers have been suffering a lot over the past year. They need to be our priority.
Fair enough. It will be interesting to look at what will happen during the electoral campaign of the next European elections and which political forces will hinge upon the establishment of a European social union. Meanwhile, Mrs. Toia, thank you very much for coming in today.
Pleasure for me to be here.
And that's it for today's show. You can find many other contents about the ideas, discourse and policies of social Europe on Eurovision's website at www.eurovisions.eu. Until next time, goodbye.